So my name is Gamino, and I am a master's candidate for intercultural services in healthcare. And my research today is going to be on medical interpreters in North Carolina. And I was interested in contrasting the job market with the educational preparation that is offered in the state. So just for some background, I wanted to talk about the interpreting profession. So the interpreting profession in general is expected to grow by 46% by the year 2020. And in North Carolina, this growth is primarily driven by the Hispanic and Latino population. From the year of 2000 to 2010, the Hispanic population in North Carolina grew by 950%. And the U.S. Census data from 2010 indicates that the Hispanic population was over 800,000. So that makes North Carolina 11th among all states for the largest Hispanic and Latino population. And so this leads me into interpreters. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 guarantees the right to an interpreter, and this is in both legal proceedings, so courtrooms, and in hospitals. And so all of this leads me to my research questions. So my research questions were motivated by learning about the interpreting profession. So first I wanted to find out which educational programs are offered in North Carolina that are offered to become an interpreter. My second research question is the employment criteria that are required by large medical centers in North Carolina. And then third, to see if these interpreter educational programs are preparing students to work within some of these large medical centers. So I just wanted to also bring up the fact that using qualified medical interpreters is very beneficial for everyone involved. So using a qualified medical interpreter increases patient health outcomes, increases patient comprehension, and research has shown there's an overall reduction in medical errors using a qualified medical interpreter compared to using a family member or a bilingual hospital employee. So then we'll go into some of the findings from the educational institutions. So right now, North Carolina does not offer a bachelor's degree in interpreting studies. There is one master's degree offered here at Wake Forest, and most of the education is offered at the community colleges. There are a total of 14 interpreting certificates and associate's degrees that are offered throughout the state. There are 2 associate's degrees that are offered, and those are in community Spanish interpreting and healthcare interpreting. And this healthcare interpreting one is a relatively new program. So this was started in 2012. And then, as you can see, there are a total of 11 certificates that are offered in interpreting. And then, as you can see over here on the right, you'll see that the schools, the colleges that offer these programs are scattered throughout the state. So then we're going to go into my second research question, was to address the employment criteria required for healthcare interpreters at some of these large medical centers. So first of all, I only chose large medical centers that were defined by either being level 1 or 2 trauma centers. So these are trauma centers. These are centers that are able to provide services for traumatic injuries, but also have enough medical equipment and healthcare personnel that can provide services for a variety of different issues. So what is important to know about these types of medical centers is that they usually provide services to a larger community than a larger number of people than what is in their local community. So the 3 medical centers that were selected for this research were Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, Mission Health System, and Duke University Hospital. And Duke University Hospital is actually reported last year in 2013 that they serve patients from 98 of North Carolina's 100 counties. And so then this leads me into the findings. After speaking with the interpreter managers, these were a list of general qualifications that are required for applicants. So interpreter applicants should have interpreting experience. This preferably would be within a medical setting. The applicants should also have an understanding of the role of the interpreter. And at minimum, the applicants should possess a bachelor's and associate's degree. However, 2 of these medical centers require at minimum a bachelor's degree, but it can be within any field. So in order to find out if these applicants are qualified, the interview process is conducted in 2 steps. First, there's a written assessment that is given, and if the applicant performs well, usually with an 80 to 85 proficiency on the written assessment, then they're invited back for the second step, which would be an oral mock interpreting session. And if applicants perform well on both of these, they are then extended an official job offer. However, all of the interpreter managers that were interviewed as part of this research expressed frustration in finding qualified applicants. There was one medical center that had a vacancy for up to 2 years because there were a lack of qualified applicants, which would lead me into my conclusions. So my first conclusion has to do with the certificates that I mentioned earlier. These certificates lack academic standardization. So there's a lack of continuity in the curriculum and the entry requirements and overall in the titles given to certificates. So since 11 certificates are offered in North Carolina, it could seem that these certificates are enough to meet the demand of employers, but this is not the case, especially for large medical centers. My second conclusion has to do with the disconnect that exists between the institutions of higher education and the medical centers. So the educational programs that are offered are not meeting the needs of what some of these large medical institutions are requiring. So as I mentioned, all of the medical centers that were surveyed for this project expressed frustration in finding qualified applicants. And so this would lead me to suggest that developing a bachelor's degree in interpreting studies could potentially aid in the development of qualified interpreter applicants for some of these medical centers. However, further research would still need to be conducted in order to determine if or where this type of degree could be offered within North Carolina. However, I still feel that this research is valuable in highlighting the educational program that is offered and highlighting that there is a disconnect between the job market that exists today. Does anyone have any questions?
For the certificates, on average, how many courses were required?
It's an 18, all these except for one are 18 credit hours. One of them is only a 15 credit hour. So they're usually done over a year.
So that vacancy that was for 2 years, how did they manage to communicate? Through the telephone?
So there's a certain number of interpreters they have on staff, and they can have contract interpreters that they bring in until they are able to fill the full-time position.
I noticed on the first table there's the Spanish facilitator certificates and the Spanish interpreter. What's the difference between the Spanish facilitator and Spanish interpreter?
That's the thing. There isn't a big difference. So this was part of that lack of academic standardization that I mentioned. They're offered at different schools, at different colleges, but the courses are very similar. So some of them, there's a little bit of difference. Some of them are for native English speakers and some are for native Spanish speakers, but oftentimes the courses are still the same.
Do you know if there are relevant organizations or agencies that might do accrediting across these different institutions that might help that standardization problem you were mentioning?
There are. So North Carolina college curriculum has certain classes that they have approved as part of these certificates or as part of the associate's degree. So each program director chooses to see if they want to follow that exact curriculum or if they want to modify the courses. And at each community college, there's also an advisory board that sort of gauges the needs of the community to see if the courses that are offered are going to be relevant for the needs of the community. So there is that, but it still seems that these certificates are still not enough for what the job market is requiring.
I think Professor Francasa was asking if there are other national certifications or professions that.
There are 2 national certifications for interpreters, although North Carolina doesn't require interpreters to be nationally certified. So there's a growing interest in this, but it's still not there yet.
Since they don't require the national certification, how hard is it for, say, an interpreter who went to school out of state? Like, do employers within the state recognize similar degrees from other states? Or is that...
Yeah, and so, like I mentioned, that a lot of these, 2 of these medical centers require a bachelor's degree, but it can be an international bachelor's degree. And then they have that sort of screening process where they do the written assessment and the oral assessment to sort of gauge their abilities.